Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And it's really cool. I do want to let you know that today, Brian Smith is on the show as a courtesy of LinkedIn Jobs. And LinkedIn is the college recruiting sponsor across the Locked On Podcast Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's all one word. LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. Terms and conditions apply. Anyway, Brian Smith joins me. I'm Stephen Willis, and this is an extra edition of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. And we're actually going to talk a little bit of recruiting today, Brian.
That's my favorite subject. Yeah, so I'm hooked. Let's do it.
That's why you're here. We've been doing a lot of preview stuff, but there's a couple of storylines that I want to talk about. The first thing is William Echoles is starting to really blow up, and he gained his extra star on 24/7. Now all of a sudden, like the Alabamas of the world is starting to offer this player, and he's going to face a little pressure to go over there, just like Jaheim Otis did a couple of years ago. I think Ole Miss has the relationship to hold on. They've been in on William Echoles for months at this point, and you're at less than 90 days away from signing day. So this is almost like a Hail Mary attempt by Alabama, but it's almost good that it's confirming that you're going after the right type guy if Alabama's interested in him, if that makes sense.
Well, you and I liked him a long time ago, and Ole Miss got him shortly after we discussed him. Big-bodied kid. A lot of people thought that he'd be better at offensive line. Ole Miss didn't think that way. I highly doubt Nick's worried about offensive guard too much. I imagine he's worried about nose guard. And I think he could play. He could play strong side end in their style of defense, but it's just hard to find 300-pound guys that can play nose. So I imagine that's what he wants him to do. I don't see why he wasn't ranked higher earlier, other than the following: he's from a podunk school in the state of Mississippi. There's nobody there to scout him. He lived where you and I do in Polk County, Florida. Somebody would have already found it. Just the way it is.
Yeah, he goes to the same high school that Chris Jones went to, and everybody knows the Chris Jones stories that before the Mississippi-Alabama game, he was a low 3-star player, and by the Under Armour All-American game, he was like ranked second in the country.
Yeah. Sometimes people find him a little bit later. Maybe Echoles is that guy this year that people start to really turn up the heat with the numbers, and ends up being ranked higher on all the networks.
Yeah, I think he's somewhere around 125 on 247 at the moment. The ascent is starting for this young man, but his stats in his video from his senior year, yeah, I mean, you can just see, you get why Ole Miss had him at defensive line back in June.
Again, I'm just going to toot our own horn. You and I thought that he could play it too at the SEC level. So good for us.
Yeah. Hey, 10 years me working at Rivals, you being the Florida football scout, it comes in handy from time to time.
That's right. That's right. And I don't think that's going to change either.
Yes. Another player that is really interesting in this, a player that I've been keeping an eye on, he's a Nebraska kid at the moment, is Kewan Lacy, the running back out of Lancaster, Texas. Ole Miss is still on him. Lane Kiffin during the bye week made a trip out to Texas, and whenever that happens, this is probably more serious than you think. I think this is a legit flip watch for the Ole Miss Rebels moving forward, especially as wins and success builds for Ole Miss potentially during the season. I like Kewan Lacy. Ole Miss has a type at running back I always talk about. I'm not talking about body type, because if you look at Ulysses Bentley IV and Quinshon Judkins and the body type, you'd say those are completely different dudes. But their feet, their lateral movement, the ability to go side to side at full speed is what separates them. Lacy has that ability as well.
And he's playing at Lancaster, which is one of the suburban South Dallas schools that goes against really good competition. He's a kid that's used to being in the fray week after week after week. He'll be able to adjust to the Southeastern Conference a lot easier than most if that's what he decides to do. And he's got the right frame too. He's built, for those that don't know, kind of like Judkins. He's around 200 pounds, and he's a kid that's filled out pretty good already. He's going to be college ready as a freshman and help somebody out.
Yeah, you have a situation. If Ole Miss can get the flip with him, and, granted, Kedrick Criscano has not been playing this season, and that's because Judkins and Bentley are really, really good football players. But you're looking at a 2024 with Judkins as the starter, a Riscano as the backup, a number 3 of potentially Kewan Lacy, not counting who comes in the transfer portal and anybody that has extra years going on. This running back room looks pretty good moving forward.
If you're in a situation where you're going to be recruited by Kiffin, he's always done a good job with getting the football to his skill guys in a variety of ways. Judkins is obviously about as good a fit for him as possible because he can catch. But this is something, like you mentioned, Bentley had a heck of a game recently. Whoever gets hot, he'll give him the ball. Mm-hmm. He's not afraid. So the depth will play itself into factors in each game. And yeah, I think that makes sense. Why wouldn't you want to play in that offense if you're a running back? Because it's proven.
Yeah, just a skill position player, period. And
absolutely.
Yeah, it's pretty fantastic at the moment. And let's change gears right now to the Ole Miss Auburn game tonight in Jordan-Hare Stadium. You have a situation that historically Auburn has done really well against Ole Miss, and especially in Jordan-Hare Stadium. But we also have the situation where most of the time Auburn has a better football team than Ole Miss when Ole Miss plays that game in Jordan-Hare Stadium. It's kind of flipped this year, and Ole Miss is a touchdown favorite going down into Auburn. Auburn is struggling at quarterback position. Their wide receivers don't look particularly good. The offensive line has been a mess since Gus Malzahn left. I don't know if one player offensively for Auburn could start for Ole Miss.
It wouldn't be more than 2 or 3, and that's pushing it. You know, it's just they're in rebuild mode.
Yeah.
I mean, I've started helping, cover the Auburn Tigers a little bit. There's some rough patches. And receiver in particular. Peyton Thorne's not great anyway. Robbie Ashford, he just can't read defenses. I'm convinced. It's going to be a long finish to this year. If you think it's bad now for them, wait till they play Alabama with Alabama's defense. But Iron Bowl won't be pretty. But yeah, I just don't think 7's enough. I think Ole Miss wins by double digits. I think they'll win by a couple touchdowns. Auburn can't score. Yeah. They just can't score. They're horrible on offense.
And I've heard rumors, and it's just rumors, nothing real, and just this kind of stuff in the ether, that they're hoping to hit the transfer portal in the offseason and bring in another quarterback. They're hoping Robbie Ashford grad transfers out. But their big concern coming in here, and the reason they keep going to Peyton Thorne, is because if they put Robbie Ashford in, let's say next week, let's say Thorne does not have a good game tonight, but next week Robbie Ashford gets into the game, there's a 4-game stretch that Auburn can win. And they can go into that game against Alabama, bowl eligible and extremely hot. And we all know how Jordan-Hare weirdness can happen. And if that happens, for lack of a better word, you would be kind of stuck with Robbie. And that would hurt you in the transfer portal because of the momentum that he built up in those 4 games. What say you?
I wouldn't go there if I was a receiver with him throwing. They know they need guys that can pitch it around. I mean, Ole Miss fans know Hugh Freeze. He's a very balanced coach, running pass, kind of like Lane. He'll throw it around, but if he's got the running game going, he'll go to that too. It's balanced. But if you're a receiver, and that's what Auburn needs more than anything else, Ashford's just not accurate enough, man. And again, against Alabama, that's going to be exposed. They'll put 8 in the box, man up outside, and be able to do it and suffocate Auburn. They will suffocate them from start to end. That'll be 31-10. It'd be ugly.
How different would this season have looked like if Ole Miss hadn't ponied up to get Spencer Sanders and let him go to Auburn?
Well, I mean, he couldn't be any worse than what they got. I'd imagine they'd thrown it around a little bit. I mean, he can get hot. He's a real streaky kid. But, yeah, Peyton Thorne's just not very good, man. I've watched a bunch of him at Auburn. If that's the best you could do in the portal, and I know it was a really awkward situation, coaching change and all that. I get it. But, man, that's why quarterback matters so much. Even if they had Ole Miss's receivers, how good would they be? With Peyton Thorne thrown to them or Robbie Ashford, still wouldn't matter. They'd be bad. So you're right. Yeah, Sanders matters.
Yeah, I think they moved they have Rivaldo Fairweather at tight end, and they've moved him out to wide receiver just because they're trying to mix and match bodies, and that didn't work down in Baton Rouge either.
Yeah, I'm going to have my challenges writing about the Tigers. It's rough, brother. It's rough.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Brian, thank you so much, man. We'll see you next week.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it. Thank you much.